Good evening, everyone. It's Monday, February 24th, 2014, and welcome to the regular meeting of the Glendale Transportation and Parking Commission. May I have the first item, Anush?
Item 1A, roll call. Commissioner Kirkjian,
Here.
Commissioner Sahakian, Commissioner Gonzalez,
Here.
Commissioner Bartuso,
Here.
Yakubian.
Here. Next item.
Item 1B, flag salute, Chairperson Yakubian.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. What's next, Anush?
Item 2 is posting of the agenda. The agenda for the Monday, February 24th, 2014 regular meeting of the Glendale Transportation and Parking Commission was posted by Friday, February 21st, 2014 before 5:30 p.m. on the bulletin board outside of City Hall.
Very good. Next.
Item 3 is approval of minutes. At item 3A is the October 28th, 2013 regular meeting.
I'll make the motion to approve the minutes.
Seconded.
And the next.
Item 3B, the December 16th, 2013 special meeting minutes.
Chair motion.
Move it. Make a motion to move it.
Seconded.
Very good. Okay. Next item, Anush.
Item 4 is oral communications. Discussion is limited to items not a part of this agenda. Each speaker is allowed 5 minutes. The commission may question the speaker, but there will be no debate or decision.
Okay, I have 2 cards for oral communication. I'll call up Ms. Harriet Harris, followed by Victor Caballero.
Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Harriet Harris. I'm here to speak to you on 2 items. The other one is an agendized item, but the first item I wanted to talk to you about was the meeting that was held, not by you, but by staff on October 17th, 2013, regarding the preferential parking passes. We received a letter in the mail that said that the City Council had approved an increase to these parking passes. And when I attended the meeting, I realized that it had already been approved. And I thought this was a community meeting to discuss, to take input from the community about the increase. I was very disappointed that that had taken place ahead of time without any notice to the affected neighbors. So I'm here today to ask, I don't remember if it was stated at that meeting, but I'm not sure if that topic came to you first to discuss the increase, and if it had, why weren't the neighbors notified, or the interested parties who live on these streets? So that's basically my comments for that.
Okay. Well, I don't want to really get into this, but I know that it was brought before the commission, and everything that's put before the commission is agendized, and it's put forth to the public to attend our meetings openly. But that's what I can say. I know that the public was given notice of it.
I realize that. At that meeting on October 17th, when we were all told that these were courtesy notices sent, some people raised the question, why weren't courtesy notices done before the increase was actually approved by you and or the council? And they said, well, that the noticing would be too complicated or too costly, but they felt it was okay to notify us afterwards, and I really take exception to that. I do work for a local jurisdiction in their planning department, and that's not, and my understanding is that's not how these types of issues are dealt with, especially issues where you're raising the cost from $6 to $25. So that was a definite concern at the meeting.
Okay.
And I just wanted to bring that forth.
Thank you, Ms. Harris.
Thank you.
Next, Mr. Caballero.
Chairperson, I was hoping that I would be able to comment. I don't want to step on Council's presentation tonight. I know that there's a presentation on the transportation network companies, and I just had some comments post the presentation, if that was okay, if you could indulge me in that.
Let me say, typically we take those comments now during oral communications. It's not typically informational. It's not typical for discussion. It's just informational purposes.
Sure, not a problem.
Would you care to make a comment? Would you care to?
Sure. I just wanted to say a couple of things. First of all, I wanted to make the Commission aware, and again, Council, with all due respect, hopefully I'm not stepping on any of your presentation, but the network transit companies, the network transportation companies, rather, I just wanted to make the Commission aware that, and you probably may already be aware, that they have been excluded from LAX for all of the reasons that have been in the paper, and I can repeat today, is the issue with respect to permits, the issue with respect to their insurance. I'm sure that you all heard of the 6-year-old young girl that was killed over the holidays in San Francisco, that subsequently Uber decided that they were not responsible for this, and they immediately divested themselves of the driver, which I believe, and we believe in the transportation industry, across the board industry, that at the end of the day will not hold water, given that he was working for them. We wanted to make you aware that Uber, while having been, for all intensive purposes, permitted under the guise of the CPUC, are also still appealing. They're not comfortable in that they've been allowed to continue operating in the state of California. Frankly, we don't know what they want. We in the transportation industry are a little confused. We are appealing the CPUC's decision because of the lack of regulatory oversight that's been placed on these transportation companies that, for all intensive purposes, are performing as taxi cabs. So we have an issue with them and are appealing the CPUC's decision, but it's somewhat confusing in that Uber is appealing the decision that is allowing them to operate. But anyway, the CPUC, I'm sure, will deal with them in that regard. What was brought to light in the recent accidents has been that the insurance that is being carried by these drivers not only does not cover, not only do the transportation network companies do not take responsibility for the accident, but the accidents are being denied by insurance companies because they are being conducted, the accidents are occurring while in a commercial setting, and the insurance that the drivers are carrying is personal insurance. So that is a huge issue that we have in the transportation industry, and quite frankly, it becomes a public safety issue when you stop and think about it. When a municipality could be held responsible for an accident within its jurisdiction for not enforcing what we in the taxi cab industry consider to be a taxi cab operator. And then lastly, what I'd like to say is that as a result of some of the limitations that have been placed on the municipality, on the city of Glendale specifically, by the CPUC in their ruling, what that has caused, unfortunately, is that there has been a preponderance of bandit taxis that have invaded not just Glendale, but Burbank, the neighboring city, and Pasadena, the neighboring city, in a huge way, in a way that is impacting the industry, the taxi cab industry, but also putting in possible harm's way the general public. At the Galleria, at the Americana, taxi cabs from other jurisdictions are coming into the city of Glendale to drop off, mind you, illegal bandit taxis, no insurance, in most cases no driver's licenses, really nobody for the city to hang a ticket on or whatever, dropping off and then hanging around to pick up. And we realize that the city of Glendale has much higher issues to deal with respect to public safety. There's rapes, there's murders, and all these really serious, egregious crimes that obviously we don't expect the city of Glendale to devote a huge amount of resources, or the police department to devote a huge amount of resources to this, i.e. bandit taxis, but just touching them periodically in these strategic locations through the police department has been my experience in the 25, almost 30 years of experience in this business, will scoot them over to the cities nearby. So we're just asking that maybe a little bit higher focus be placed on the bandit taxi operators in the city. And then lastly, I brought for the Commission and your Council what the City of Los Angeles uses as the enforcing documents for the purposes of enforcing banded taxis. And you'll find that, and I'd like to turn this over to the Commission, it's not just the ordinance itself and the changes that the City of Los Angeles undertook vis-a-vis this document, but rather the fees that are attached to it. And that's where the teeth come in. You know, if a banded taxi cab driver gets caught in the city of Glendale and has to pay $1,300, $1,400 to get their vehicle back from impound, plus another $300 or $400 in fees in the hassle and in the processing that it's going to take to apprehend them, I can guarantee you that it's only going to take a couple, 2 or 3 a month, and it's going to make it known in the industry, bandit industry, that Glendale is not the place to go as a bandit driver. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr.
Let me ask you said they're banned from LAX. Are they also banned from Burbank, Ontario, other airports as well?
Burbank is in the process of developing a cease and desist letter, and we'll be sending it off probably within the next few days.
How about Ontario?
Ontario, I've not had an opportunity to check with them, so I'd be...
How about other airports throughout the state? Is this something common practice that
Well,
the airports are doing because of safety and tourists that are coming in and out, or is it LAX an exception or something in process? What's the...
No, Commissioner, it's across the nation where, you know, it's a public safety issue. So the airports are taking a serious look at this, and LAX took the lead, and it was very public in what they did. There are set rules in all airports across the nation. Post-September 11th, the airports became a very secured area in every state and every city where an airport exists. So it's airports across the nation that are taking a very egregious attitude with respect to these entities.
Let me ask you another question. You were here on December 16th as director, represent yourself as director of BellCap. Are you still director of BellCap?
I am, yes.
Okay. Do you guys have sort of a employee handbook where your drivers had to be held to a certain standard within of a guidebook or some kind of guideline at all?
We don't have a handbook, Commissioner, but we do have a training process, so therefore there's a training a curriculum that they all undertake. Yes, the rules for all intents and purposes are the rules set by the jurisdiction where we operate. Most jurisdictions, neighboring cities, all maintain pretty much the same ordinance that obligates them to comport to certain regulations. With respect to keeping clean, keeping neat, keeping washed cars, obviously that's part of the
What
industry.
about these bandit taxis, the Lyft or whatever? Do they have any like code of conduct or their manual,
Commissioner,
driver manual and so forth?
That's the wild, wild west, Commissioner. You know, every so often there'll be an e-blast or a text blast says anybody interested in driving for Uber, come to a certain hotel in a certain location. Oftentimes it happens near the airport, and a slew of people show up. They half fill out applications, and they're handed a phone, and they're ready to go. Witnessed personally. So it's a scary situation that the state of California and frankly the nation is experiencing with the network transportation companies. Frankly, don't know if they're ever going to go away completely. Probably not. If you ask me personally, I don't think so. I think there's going to be a place for them somewhere within the transportation industry. However, the way that they are operating today, the sheer lack of regulatory oversight on these entities, quite frankly, is very, very scary.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, that's it for oral communications, no other cards. Anush, what is next?
Item 5 is public hearing. And 5A is a report regarding the application for renewal of a preferential parking on the 1000 block of Zook Drive between Cleveland Road and Norton Avenue.
Okay, well, I'd like to open the public hearing, and I have Juliano Babayan. Juliano.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. So we just like my
So could you state your name? just
Juliano
for-
Babayan. So as one of my neighbors stated, we did get the letter regarding the fee hike. It's pretty, the way our street is set up, a third of it has no permit parking. The rest of it has permit parking. We feel it costs a lot to pay $25 per car, per vehicle, especially if you're a household that has 5 people, 5 vehicles, and we're trying to get it. Petition got signed with all the neighbors wanting to have the permit parking removed from the rest of the street on Zook Drive so that we can park at our own need. There used to be a college there which is shut down, so I think that might have been the reason why there was permit parking at that time that was approved. We're looking to have it removed. And the second thing I wanted to ask is, if it does get approved, how do we get a refund, considering that there's 10 months left for the year? It's only been 2 months past in the year. Thank you.
Can I ask you a question? How do you find the parking to be now?
The parking
There's no issues for you?
no issues whatsoever, no. Everybody has their own spots and have never had any issues with anybody parking. Even when there are guests that come over, parking is not an issue whatsoever on our street.
Okay.
It's because we have enough parking, but the permit parking, the spike in the price was the primary thing
Was
that
the
really...
impetus. Mhm.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, thank you very much, Giuliano.
Thank you.
I'd like to call Ms. Harriet Harris.
Good evening again. I live at 1020 Zook Drive. My name is Harriet Harris. I live there with my husband. I've lived there 8 years. I've never observed a parking problem on that street. My parents have owned that property since 1985. The only people I've ever seen get a ticket were my parents when they were there painting when they had a tenant changeover, and that was quite a few years ago. I am also concerned about the refund potential because we are only 2 months into the process. We opted to get 2 passes and 1 guest pass, so we're into this for $75, and the increase was quite significant. I'm in full support of staff's recommendation.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Harris. If there's no other comment, then I'll close the public hearing on that, and I will turn it over to you, Mr. Golanyan.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the Commission. The report in front of you is regarding a resolution for the removal of preferential parking restriction on the 1000 block of Zook Drive between Cleveland Road and Norton Avenue, and staff obviously recommends the Commission to approve the proposed resolution. In response to Ms. Harris's and the other gentleman, Babayan's question, Mr. Dombrowski, our parking manager, is working with our processing firm who's handling these applications to get the refunds due to all the residents within that block. And both Mr. Dombrowski and I are available for questions.
Is this, it's interesting, in my years on the commission, I've never come across this particular issue of wanting to have it removed. It's typically the other way around, people wanting the preferential. So I guess my question to you is, are you seeing from the staff's vantage point more streets and communities that are now addressing and perhaps wanting to remove preferential parking based on the concerns that they've had with the increase in the permit fees, which just went into effect January?
Correct. Madam Chair, as member of the Commission, actually we are seeing some interest. We haven't seen any formal applications for removal, but typically in situations like this, the residents, we consider the need for parking when the fees increase, and these applications for establishment of preferential parking could have been many, many years ago where there was a problem because of a commercial entity that was nearby, and that problem doesn't exist. So residents being faced with an increase in fee, reconsidering the situation, and they may come forth with application for removal.
There's nothing in the municipal code that has any guidelines with, let's say, a street or units that petition for removal, like a time frame. If they decide they want it, the resolution passes, it's removed, can they down the road decide they want to do it again? I mean, is there something, guidelines to give them, a timeline that once they have removed that preferential parking, that they must wait X amount of years? I mean, they can they can begin the process again if they want to.
You're correct, Madam Chair. There is no restrictions on timing.
I see. Okay, so I'll pass it to you guys.
I have a question. So the preferential parking discussion came before my time on the commission, so excuse my ignorance. But I wanted to know, there's been this conversation, you kind of alluded to commercial activity kind of imposing on residential areas, and that probably being the need for a lot of preferential parking requests. Was there a discussion, for example, when South Brand was happening, about imposing these fees on the commercial activity that's happening and not so much on the residential, and where did that conversation go? I know, for example, like Ethel Street near Glendale Community College, I imagine that they have permit parking because of the community college nearby. So that's just one example.
Madam Chair, as member of the Commission, Commissioner Boutroussov, just like yourself, I was not involved in the initial process when the preferential parking was established, and I'll defer it to Mr. Dombrowski. But I'm pretty sure there had been, and I know for a fact that there had been extensive discussions between the merchants, the commercial property owners, as well as the residents. And in the case of the South Brand District, they came to a compromise that was agreeable to both the commercial property owners as well as the residential property owners / residents. But if you want further detail, Mr. Dombrowski would be more than happy to provide that.
One thing, Commissioner, good night. The one thing I wanted to add about this, when we did the outreach for South Brand, it was very different than any other area in the city. All of the other areas are a case-by-case basis. Up at the college, it has its own dynamics, and the college is really the driving force up there. With any of the other businesses, each street and proximity to where the business is and how flourishing the business is and how much demand it creates. Likewise, how quickly they're going to be there. Hair salon is very much different than a Starbucks, so the time that it takes, all of those things go into it. So unfortunately, there's not a one-size-fits-all approach. In the South Brand area, it was very much a compromise situation with the dealerships, because as they looked at increasing the price for what they would contribute to this, they also looked at increasing their share and said, these are public streets. If we're going to be paying the bulk of these costs, shouldn't we get a section in this? And so at the end, the compromise really came down to, let's tackle each area one at a time. This one in particular was put in 1988, and until recently, with the cost increases, there were people who would still every year get a couple free guest permits, so there was absolutely no incentive to switch. Once the price change happened, that really created an incentive, and I think this is the first one that you'll see of, I think the switch is now on with the change in pricing, where you'll now start seeing petitions for removal.
And just a quick follow-up. So if these same residents came back 10 years from now and we see a completely different San Fernando Road where there's a lot of commercial activity and you see a lot of, parking back on Zook Drive, is there room in the process to allow for those commercial activities to be imposed on those fees and not these residents? Is that what I'm understanding? Because you said it's done on a case-by-case basis.
The fees that are imposed citywide the fees are what they are, and generally commercial's not involved, and commercial doesn't have the opportunity to purchase permits. With the exclusion of South Brand. Everywhere else, the permit fees are paid only by the residents, and only the residents are allowed permits.
So to answer your question more directly is, unless we create another special district like South Brand, the citywide fee that was adopted by the City Council applies to every street in the city.
Did you want to say something?
No, just off the topic here, does this program generate any income to the city, or is it break even or lose money?
Commissioner Kurjian, that question, last year, that same question, the program had significant losses, and it cost in the neighborhood of $100,000 to run the program.
To accommodate residents, you mean?
What was that?
Basically to accommodate residents.
Correct. For the overall cost of this program, be it the staffing involved, the permits themselves, the mailings, the signs, everything that related to this program cost about in the neighborhood of $100,000, and we were generating about $12,000 a year in income from the program from the way that the pricing was structured before. The idea of raising the permit fees last year was to accommodate over 30 years of not raising the fees and to bridge that to where we are expected to break even on the program. This is not a money generator at all.
So these fees at $25, which was it went from 6 to 25, basically a break-even number, $25.
Correct. The goal is to break even on the program.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, members of the Commission, like Mr. Dombrowski mentioned, our intention is to be cost neutral in this program, and that's the number one reason why we raise the rates.
Okay. I wanted to, I guess, just two things really quick. One is the issues kind of popped up. People are talking about it, and the idea of more, perhaps more applications coming forward. Is staff, I guess, just to be mindful that there may be that issue of people asking for refunds, and I don't know if you guys have approached that issue, set a deadline, set a time where you would consider it or not consider it, but that's something that pops to my head initially is how you're going to address that issue. And then secondly, I would like to applaud the residents for coming forward in a fast, expeditious manner, assessing their situation where you live, and taking the time to get the signatures and do this. It takes work, and I think if we're ready to vote on it or make a motion.
I have a question first, please. Is it clear when the effective date is? Is it the action of this commission? Does it go to the council? Or when do the residents know the milestone date? And then how does that apply to the refunds?
Commissioner Gonzalez, once the action is taken here, we will send out a letter notifying all the residents that we will be removing the signs. Typically, as Commissioner Yacobian said, this is not what typically happens. This is not the norm, and mostly we're sending out letters saying we will be installing signs. So we wait a periodic time of allowing users to get their permits, to go on the website, to do a lot of things. In this case, there's really no harm. We can schedule the work effective immediately as soon as our crews have time and weather permitting and everything else to just remove the signs entirely.
So is the effective date to prorate any refunds the date of the action of this commission? Or does it go to the city council? Or how does this get cleared up?
In this case, I think that the residents really haven't received any benefit for it, so my recommendation would be just to issue the refunds in full for the time that they paid. They really, the month or two of benefits that they've received out of this, we could prorate it down to the month if needed, but for this particular example in Zook, I would say just to refund the residents. There were 6 residents that were impacted and bought permits this year.
Thank you.
So I guess with this, we would make a motion. Can someone like to move?
Okay, I will move the staff recommendation of this agenda item, please.
I'll second it.
Commissioner Kirkjian,
Yes.
Commissioner Sahakian, Commissioner Gonzalez,
Yes.
Commissioner Bartrusov,
Yes.
Chairperson Yakubian.
Yes. Excellent. Okay. Next, Anush.
Item 6 is information only. At 6A is a presentation and update regarding the transportation network companies.
Great.
Madam Chair, members of the Commission, pursuant to your request at the last Commission meeting, Mr. Bobby Aldesco, our Assistant City Attorney, has prepared a presentation on the transportation network companies for your enjoyment.
Madam Chair, members of the Commission, it's not such a presentation. It's really more like a brief informational review. The matters are pretty simple, actually, in terms of what's happened legally in the state since last September. On September 19th, the CPUC adopted a set of regulations, about 28 rules and regulations to be specific, for these transportation network companies, TNCs. The reason why, companies such as Lyft, Sidecar, UberX, the reason why the CPUC can obtain jurisdiction of these companies is because they consider them to be charter party passenger carriers. So as an agency of the state that decided that they have jurisdiction, they could enforce these rules upon them. They already have jurisdiction, as you know, over charter buses, over trains, and other types of connective means of transportation. So like limousine companies are also covered by them, rail service, and other transportation services other than taxis. In any case, what they established, they did 28 rules for these TNCs, and the rules, for example, require them to obtain a license from the CPUC. They require each driver to undergo a criminal background check. They establish a driver training program. They implement a zero-tolerance policy on drugs and alcohol. And they require a commercial liability insurance policy that is more stringent than the CPUC's current requirements for limousines, requiring a minimum of $1 million per incident coverage for any kind of accidents involving TNC vehicles and drivers in transit to or during a trip. Such as, for example, if somebody had a trip, they finished the trip, and then they're going home, they wouldn't be covered for that part of the trip. If they were going from home to pick up somebody, in that case, they would be covered. All right? So it's basically the way we work with our contractors. If somebody is a contractor for us working on a job, he's going to be responsible for various insurance requirements. For our employees, we would cover them 100% at any time that they're actually working on a job, driving city vehicles, coming back and forth on city work. So this is the same kind of principle, that as long as they're doing any kind of work, they will be covered by insurance.
Excuse me, Bobby, let me interrupt you. Which state agency regulates taxis?
There is no state agency that regulates taxis. The municipalities themselves regulate taxis. I don't know the historical reasons for this. Usually when these rules and regulations are made, it's because of various political conflicts, that resolve themselves in terms of who gets to regulate what and whatever. I know there's going to be an appeal to the jurisdiction of the CPUC over these transit companies. That should be very interesting to find out, because that's going to determine whether they have the jurisdiction to govern them or not. If they resemble taxis too much, and again, I can't make a distinction myself. I would have to really research this issue, because it's not something that's come up before in the past, nothing that's ever been really addressed. And but basically, if they don't have the jurisdiction legally because they're too much like taxis, then they wouldn't be able to regulate them. However, in the meantime, for example, the city of LA, in October, about a month later after this regulations came out, one of the council members brought a motion to the council to ask the council to appeal the CPUC order, right? And the council voted 7-6 to deny that motion. In addition, the mayor of the city of LA, Eric Garcetti, pretty much stated unequivocally that he wasn't going to, that even if the council had voted to ban these from the city, that he would veto anything of that nature, because he felt that it was important for the future to let these businesses come into the city. Just today, the CPUC welcomed the creation of a peer-to-peer rideshare insurance coalition. Basically, what peer-to-peer is that, if I want to call up anybody to give me a ride, I'll just get on the internet and they'll give me a ride. So it could be almost like totally free in that sense. But basically what it does is that it's a coalition that it's comprised of transportation network companies, insurance companies, and other stakeholders who have come together to discuss potential new or modified insurance products for this industry. In any case, the CPUC President Michael Peavy said today that the commissioner assigned to the TNC that he was happy to see this diverse set of participants come together to find a market solution that will enhance insurance for the TNCs. Again, I only mention a few of the rules which they have. They also have another rule for conducting a 19-point car inspection for the car. So they have a lot of rules The difficulty, one of the things that's come up, in people talking about these rules, is that they don't have people to enforce the rules. They only have like about 5 staff for the whole entire state. This is something that they're going to have to ramp up in order to be able to bring coverage for these regulations. In addition, they ask all kind of requirements for them in terms of, to get a permit, you have to submit all kind of information. So you have to check the DMV records of TNC drivers for any conviction, accidents, failures to appear, suspension of driver's license, any other action. The insurance coverage must be available to cover claims regardless of whether a TNC driver maintains insurance adequate to cover any portion of the claim. So the insurance has to be like wall-to-wall coverage. Then they have all kind of reports that they must provide to the CPUC. For example, they submit reports to the Safety and Enforcement Division of the CPUC. They report all kind of reporting data for narrative reports, scan a copy of cover letters for their various drivers. They have report on providing accessible vehicles, report on providing service by zip codes, report on problems with drivers, report on hours logged by drivers, report on miles logged by drivers, report on drivers completing driver training, annual report of drivers completing driver training courses, annual update on accessibility plan, annual report on providing accessible vehicles, annual reports for providing service by zip code. So there's various kind of requirements that are pretty extensive. However, clearly this is a battle for the turf, and I don't see this issue, yet it's not baked yet. The cake is still in the oven. So if cities, municipalities, or private companies, taxi companies, choose to challenge the CPUC's jurisdiction, they may succeed. I'm at this point unable to give any kind of legal any foresight to this issue, because this hasn't never been dealt before in this kind of way, either here or in any other states. And I could definitely take this matter, if you're interested, I could take this matter further into do more research to see what are the chances of prevailing any kind of challenge to the CPUC's jurisdiction. But again, it's a very new matter, so I don't have that information for you today.
So as it stands today, these companies that were mentioned can operate in the city of Glendale?
Well, that's a very interesting question, because according to the city of Glendale rules for taxis, they're not vehicles in Glendale. They're not operating under our rules. But
they're not identified as taxis.
But they're not taxis, and under the CPUC, they're covered by a law of higher jurisdiction. Mm-hmm. It's a state law. So it's a turf battle in many ways. Generally speaking, when a state law conflicts with a city law, the state law will take precedence. I imagine the city is not going to want to pursue these in the meantime, if only because, let's say you take somebody, you give somebody a fine. Well, then he'll say, you don't have any jurisdiction over me, and then it will go into that issue. So then the city, in effect, will be buying a whole entire, we'll be challenging the jurisdiction of the CPUC the first time that we actually find somebody who has a TNC.
So I know that there's an appeal to the CPUC now. So if that appeal does not go through, as it stands now, the CPUC allows for these kind of activities throughout the state?
That's correct.
Okay. Thank you.
As Commissioner Barstrov says, pretty much a jurisdiction battle here more than anything else. But the bottom line for us is, if these TNCs are meandering around the city and where they're not held to the same standards and they're not regulated as such as taxis, I feel that we're putting public at risk. Because if LAX, which is I believe under federal government oversees them, they're not banning these TNCs, why should we allow them here? They probably know something that we don't know, or the state doesn't know. And these guys, if there are 5 guys throughout the state, it's pretty much like the gentleman said earlier, they're self-imposed drivers, which you have to do your own checks and balances. You have to be your own judge and grade yourself on what you're doing. And if a driver doesn't feel like it, they can drive 24 hours a day versus normal working hours. They're not being checked. And also, this is something not clear to me, which is, I heard it through hearsay. I just want to make sure if it's the fact. I think anybody that can get an app on their cell phone, let's say if I'm going to, after the meeting, I'm going to drop off somebody at LAX, on the way to LAX or on the way back, I can be a Lyft or whatever it is on the way back home. Is that true?
I don't know. Under the peer-to-peer ride sharing, that would be okay, I would imagine, because, you know, if I call somebody through, you know, let's say, what is he, a friend, or is he an acquaintance, or is he a stranger? What is the difference, you know, friend, stranger, or friend, you know, or acquaintance? The difference would be, you know, that, well, he's just a person who's not regulated by any kind of rules under the city. He may not be, you know, allowed at LAX. But as far as the peer-to-peer transaction, it's not governed by any laws right now, because it takes place on the internet. It's a telecommunication that happens over a cellular line. We cannot regulate that, and neither can. It's an internet transaction.
Let me ask the gentleman, Victor, what are the rates of these companies versus your services, for example?
Well, there's a couple of them that call them donations. So there really are no rates. There were no rates presented to the CPUC. And furthermore, with respect to the City of Los Angeles, Council was commenting on the City of Los Angeles. In the case of the City of Los Angeles, last Thursday, I was witness to a presentation by the Department of Transportation to the Taxi Commission. And all of the items that Council delineated with respect to the CPUC's mandate on these Lyft companies were posed in the form of a question to the CPUC. The question was, you have mandated A requirement, B requirement, C requirement, and on and on and on and on and on. Please advise how many drivers have conformed to A, B, C, D, E, and so on regulation. Not one of the regulations was responded to. Not one of them. It was unbelievable. I couldn't believe it. And I will get that document for council and the commission, and I will forward it through Ganesh. Would that be appropriate to forward it through her?
Certainly.
But you can read it yourself on LA City letterhead. It specifically requested confirmation by the CPUC that all of the regulations that have been posed on these apps and their drivers have been conformed, and to what degree. Not one of them, not one,
Mr. Caballero,
was answered.
My question was rate difference. You're not answering my question. Do you have any idea about the rates?
Their rates are whatever it is at the time. They could be lower when the volume is low, and they can be higher when the demand is high. It is up to the individual company and driver to decide what they're going to charge at any given time. There are no regulations with respect to the rates.
As far as consumers concerned?
As far as the consumer is concerned. It was very public. I might still have it on my phone. They were forwarded to me, where a Lyft driver charged some astronomical number, I think it was $350 in a premium at the peak of New Year's Eve to transport and pick someone up. I don't know if it was paid or not. There's been some real egregious overcharges that have been very public, and they're in the paper. Again, I can forward all of this information to council if you'd like, if you wish. But it's as far as regulations is concerned, it's the wild west. As a cab operator, as one having been part of the industry for a long time, all we ask as an industry is that the playing field be even. With respect to drivers with Uber and all the others coming into the city of Glendale and picking up, fine and dandy, no problem. CPUC has regulation over them. We accept that. The fact of the matter is, though, that they are performing as taxi cabs, and that is where we have an issue, because the legislature of the state of California mandated to the cities of the state of California, including Glendale, that they regulate taxi cabs, and that's why we are beholden to the city of Glendale. The app and Lyft and Uber and all these companies are not, yet they are performing as taxi cab companies, and that's where the conflict lies.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Caballero. I would recommend and request to get more information on this as this develops. Obviously, it's the new frontier on what we're going to have to manage, and a lot of legal issues that have to get sorted out. But I would like to see it come back at some point. Mr. Aldesco with some sort of an update on where we stand. I definitely would like to see Glendale being proactive in how we feel, or the city make a statement of some sort on how we're going to be dealing with this problem. But if you could bring some more information back to the commission at some point, that would be very useful.
Madam Chairman, absolutely, I can definitely bring more information as I become more, educated in the difference between a taxi and a transmission company. It's a new distinction, and it's very interesting actually why they're not taxis. But it seems like it's just simply they made a call to regulate them from the state. Like, why isn't a limo a taxi? Is it the size of the car?
Right.
Is it the color?
Right, okay.
Well,
Thank you.
I think I agree with Chairperson Yakubian that we need to be on the lookout with for these cars. Let's be on the lookout as it develops. And if there's any to report, please keep reporting back to us.
Great.
Thank you.
Any other comments? All right, well, thank you very much. I appreciate that presentation. What is next, Anush?
Item 7, commission staff comments, updates.
Mr. Golanian?
Yes, Madam Chair, members of the Commission, I have a couple of items that I'd like to just bring you up to date on. Our next pedestrian safety task force, the subcommittee meeting is scheduled for March 3rd at 6 p.m. And we are hoping that at that meeting we will decide on the schedule for the general workshop in April of this year. Let's see.
Excuse me, where is that meeting being held?
Pardon me?
Where is that meeting being held?
The task force committee meeting?
The March 3rd, 6 o'clock meeting.
Right. It's for the committee members only, and it's here at the City Hall.
Oh, the public can attend?
Not this one, but the workshop that I referenced to will be in April, and the public can attend.
That's right.
It's highly unusual.
Typically not. I think with the subcommittee,
Subcommittee of this committee?
the subcommittee that was formed from this committee on...
No, right, because I was curious. I had asked about when one could at least attend the meeting, either as a public member or whatever, but we couldn't find out when the meeting was, nor did I take the time to call, so that could have been my issue. But I don't understand that. I don't understand why that's not a public meeting.
Right. So, Commissioner Gonzalez, our intent was to be able to have a forum where every agency, every active group, and the public, and we have representation from the public, is presented so they can have a dialogue and go through a list of priorities and basically strategy to move forward with some recommendations to your commission and ultimately to City Council. And as I mentioned, we do have representation from the public, but had we opened it, this is not a workshop setting, had we opened it to the public in general, this might have taken a far longer time than what the commission had hoped for, and I think we have a short time frame, maybe 90 to 120 days to conclude our findings and move forward. But the opportunity is there, and it's going to be provided at least on 2 occasions, and like I said, hopefully in April, for anybody, any member of the public to attend and provide input.
Yeah, we'll be definitely actively encouraging the public to be attending those public workshops. It's going to be quite an event and very productive.
So can a commissioner attend just in the audience, or
At the task force committee or the
at
workshop?
the one that's on March 3rd at 6 o'clock?
There is no attendee per se unless you're a committee member,
I see.
and we have 2 commissioners who represent
No, I
your
understand
commission.
that. No, I highly respect that.
So if we open it to one person, then we have to open it to everyone, essentially.
But that will be coming back to this commission, Mr. Golanian, correct?
Absolutely.
Whatever is developed, strategized, ideas brought forth will come, and recommendations will come forth to this, so that everyone will have input and put in their opinions on it.
My only reason for commenting on it is I hope it doesn't become an issue in the future by others. But since I'm new in this commission, and maybe this is a protocol that's accepted by the city, it just seems, I can understand managing the meeting so that the public maybe can make a comment or two or limited, but the notion that something as important as this, people aren't able to at least go to listen. But maybe that's just something that our city has done before, and so therefore it's been okay. But I don't know if that seems appropriate. I just hope no one later decides to make some comments about this. And
Commissioner Gonzalez, at the risk of repeating myself, the public will be given an opportunity to be heard on 2 occasions, right? And to hear what the task force has come up with, again, on 2 occasions. And like Chairperson Yakubian mentioned, it will come back to your commission because that was a subcommittee of your commission. Secondly,
Sorry, just a quick question. Can you tell me, you alluded to the timeline, so I think the first meeting for the workshop was in January, for the subcommittee in January. Does it mean that we'll probably conclude soon after the workshop, maybe in April or May? Has there been a defined deadline?
Commissioner Bartusov, we discussed the timeline, but it was the opinion of the majority of the task force that 90 days was not feasible. And as you can see, 2 months have already gone by. Our police department folks have been working on collecting data that we wanted to identify hotspot for further discussions, and that's already been done, and we bring into the task force on Monday.
Okay.
So that will be another item on the agenda to discuss what would be the time frame moving forward, keeping in mind that we are going to have 2 workshops for the public as well.
I know that one thing that you mentioned, the police providing that information to you. The other data that you might want to keep in mind is the bike count report that's being done with the planning department and their consultants. I believe that the final draft will be released in March, and that has a lot of safety and crash data in that you might want to that you might find helpful at the subcommittee. And then my last question about that was that. Do you know what the framework of the workshop will be? Is this subcommittee to propose a toolkit of things that the community could consider and then get feedback from them, or do we know what the format of that workshop will be at this point?
Commissioner Bartusov, the task force hasn't discussed that in detail, but I'm pretty sure, judging by our last meeting, they have some very good ideas that we are going to incorporate into the workshops. My vision is there will be different stations for different topics that folks can move from one table to another and hear and be heard of that topic and provide input.
And to go along with that, I mean, exactly the point being that as we go through these series of task force meetings, that we're truly honing in on those specific areas so that when we do open up that workshop to the public and we have the experts coming and kind of listening to what we have to say, observing how our city is, that it's a very good use of the time that they are here, that we'll be able to maximize all of our issues, and hopefully everything can be at least presented and not forget something after they've left and say, gosh, why didn't we discuss this, or this, that we can really get to the crux of it. And I'm hoping that it will be a 3-day workshop, as was last time, one day specially designated for the engineers and those specialists within our city who can talk technical language with the experts that I'll say I don't certainly understand any of it, but that they do, and that's it's a good one. But I think the other 2 days are back for the public. So hopefully that's what it is. I don't want to speak where I don't have that knowledge for sure, but that would be great if it were based how it was 4 years ago. Looking forward to that.
The next item is I'm happy to report that 3 weeks ago we applied to Caltrans for an encroachment permit for the eastbound on Mountain to to Freeway 2, the turn on red. They have approved the design, so we are just going through the
Wonderful.
process of obtaining permission to work within their jurisdiction. So that should be
That's
forthcoming.
wonderful. I'm sure the public is going to be happy, those who are utilizing that road.
The next item is, again, we were pleased to find out last week that an advisory committee of the Metro Board had approved an in-depth study of the Glendale East-West connection of the bus rapid transit system. The missing link, not to be confused with the 710 missing link. And on February 27th, the board is going to hear the recommendation. This corridor was chosen from 5 other corridors, and it will go through Glendale, obviously. It will connect North Hollywood to Pasadena when it's built and completed. And the preliminary route that I've heard about is that will utilize 134 with stops at Harvey Drive Park and Ride and a potential stop in West Glendale, which is good news. So
Very good
February
news.
27th, hopefully the board will approve it and they can go ahead and start the feasibility study.
February 27 is this week, you mean?
Yes.
I mean, MTA board is approving it?
Yes.
Very good, okay.
So the recommendation will be to the board to approve.
Very good.
Can we get updates on that as it comes forward? I imagine they're going to want to do community workshops and get feedback from the public.
Actually, we were hoping somebody from the advisory committee would be able to attend tonight and give you an update, but it was too short of a notice. But definitely next month, somebody from the county will be here to talk about it. And
That's
bring
great
you up to
news.
date.
Great.
Very good news.
That's it.
Keep going, Mr.
Oh, okay.
Golanyan.
Okay.
When you have good news,
have-
you just keep going. That's the,
Very, very good.
we don't want you to stop.
Commissioners, you might have heard about the potential, the ballot measure to extend Measure R, the half sales tax. And this had come up previously, I think Commissioner Gonzalez mentioned it, and the Commission had requested that it be looked into it. So we are working with the cities of Pasadena and Burbank to put a project together, at least an application for a project for the missing link between the Gold Line and the Red Line. And this will, the initial estimate was the ballot might go on the measure this November, but I don't think they're going to be able to make it. However, we're working with these other 2 cities to include this in their list of projects to be attached to the ballot. That's another good news, and hopefully it will be successful. But I think all indications are maybe 2016.
Question, please. On that, and yes, thank you so much for the very good news, because you had responded to some questions I was going to have. Thank you. How do the last 2 relate then? What kind of a strategy relative to what I think are both the same objective, or did I miss that?
They have the same objective, but obviously different two different systems. One is a bus transit, the other one is a light rail. And I failed to mention that we have to get City Council's blessing before we submit it for Metro's consideration.
And which one is the light rail versus the rolling stock?
The light rail will connect the
No,
Gold Line.
I'm sorry. Of the 2 that you mentioned, I missed which one relates more to the light. They're both east-west, apparently.
Right, both are east-west. The light rail will connect Gold Line to the Red Line.
Okay, you said, okay, I got it. Thank you. Thank you.
You're welcome. That's all I have, folks.
Any comments? Yeah, anything you'd like to add?
I have 2 comments. So now that I'm a transportation commissioner, I have people coming at me with all sorts of questions and concerns. One thing that was brought to my attention, North Brand, north of Glen Oaks, I have a resident there that emailed me letting me know about I don't know if it's tow truck companies or used car companies that bring their tow trucks, park their trucks at the center median lane, drop off cars in the middle of the night, leave them there for 3 days, and then come back and pick them up. So that's I can forward it to you, Mr. Galanian, so that you have the details. I don't know if that's something that we can do, somehow regulate the commercial activity that's happening where there's just residential. That's one issue. The other issue, you mentioned the park and ride at Harvey. I have a friend who uses that commuter express to get to work downtown, and she tells me that a lot of the residents in that area and potentially high school students park there and then use that space not for commuter express purposes but for their own personal purposes. And by the time she gets there at 7:30 in the morning, the parking lot is completely full. So we're trying to encourage people to use public transit, but it seems like there are other barriers that are creating that issue. And I was trying to see if there's some way for the city to enforce that parking lot, if it's under our jurisdiction or somebody else's, how we can figure that problem out. I don't need an answer now, but something that we can possibly look at.
Commissioner Bartusov, it is my understanding that that park and ride, it's not within the City of Glendale jurisdiction, but we'll definitely find out and forward the concern to them for enforcement.
Okay. I'll also forward that inquiry to you as well.
Please do.
Sure.
With all the good news at Robic, you covered them all for me. Thank you.
Okay, very good. If that's it? Yeah. Anush, next.
Item 8, adjournment.
Motion to adjourn?
I'll second.
Thank you.